Now for our next tone example, we're going to use some pedals. And I have off to my left 4 pedals. I have the way huge green Rhino Overdrive, and then I have the 3 new pedals introduced by Universal Audio: the Astra Modulation Machine, the Starlight Echo Station, and the Golden Reverberator. Now the way I want to approach this section is to touch on 3 different themes. First, since Universal Audio has partnered with us to help us create these free videos, I want to give a brief overview about their pedals, the emulations they use, and why that's important. The second theme is, since these videos are about home recording, I want to talk about each effect as it relates to recording in general. You're probably already familiar with various effects pedals, since it's common to use them to create different guitar tones, but the same types of effects are used all the time when recording any instrument, including synths, keys, drums, and of course, a vocalist. So I'd like to give you some background on each effect type from a recording studio and general music production perspective. And last, I'm going to create a new tone that we can record into our system. As we talk about each style of effect, I'll give a brief history and then show some examples of those effects using the pedals. But before we dive in, I want to talk about the architecture of the UAFX pedals from Universal Audio. Now, I've been using Universal Audio products for many years, and I'm a really big fan. And what I think they do best is what we talked about in the earlier video, which is emulating classic analog equipment that give the modern music producer access to sounds that previously would be very hard or incredibly expensive to use without being in a major studio or having a very big budget for equipment. Now, what sets these pedals apart is that they've incorporated their incredible emulation technology and modeled some of the most classic analog units for each pedal to create a sound that really does stand out in terms of quality and character. So each pedal offers multiple different effects modeled after actual analog outboard gear. So this really is a step in a new direction, and for guitar pedals. I would invite you to check out their website to learn more about the features that they have, and they also have videos that go more in depth for each pedal. Now the first effect we're going to talk about is overdrive. You're probably familiar with overdrive and saturation for creating distorted rock guitar tones. But when it comes to modern music production, nearly every genre of music today, overdrive is commonly used to create a more warm-sounding tone that's similar to the ones you would hear from back in the days of analog tape. So you can start to think about very subtle overdrive to give a sound some character. So here's our overdrive unit, and of course with the drive all the way up, we get the traditional distortion sound. So if we turn this on, this is our typical distortion. But as I was mentioning, if we think about it with subtle saturation, we can turn the drive down much lower, and then if I turn it off, we'll hear our clean tone. Then if we turn this on very subtly, so it gives it a different tone. We can change the tone curve between the mids and highs, reduce some of the lows, and then we have a tone control here. So if you do have a pedal like this, if you think of overdrive just as a recording effect, we can also think of it as just subtle, warm character and saturation. Modulation is an effect created by adding a time-delayed version of the original sound back on top of itself, and then changing and varying the amount of that delay over time. By delaying a sound on top of itself and then changing the size of that delay, you can create a wide range of effects. The common parameters of modulation effects are how long the delay is, usually measured in milliseconds, how fast the delay varies. Does the delay change once per second, or does it change several times per second? Does it change smoothly or randomly or sporadically? And another is how many delayed versions of the sound are added back onto the signal. Is it one or is it many? All these parameters come together to create very common recording effects, such as vibrato, which is variations in pitch, wah-wah effect sounds, chorus, which makes one instrument sound like a group of instruments, or some doubling style of effects. Now let's take a look at some modulation. So looking at the Astra Modulation Machine, at the top we have our main controls: the speed, the depth, and the intensity. Over here is our effect mode. We have chorus brigade, flanger doubler, and then the tremolo 65. And then we have a toggle switch. So within each one of the effects, we have multiple effect modes that we can go into. So it's almost like having a couple different types of effects in each one of those effect selections. And then below we have character changes with shade, shape, and then mode, which do different things depending on what plugin you're in. So let's just turn on and get some of this classic flanger effect using modulation. We can turn up the intensity, turn up the depth a little bit to hear it a little bit more. So we have modulation using the flanger, almost getting into almost like a wah type of effect. We can go down to the tremolo where we get more of the vibrato stuff happening. And then we can switch within that effect to a different mode. We can change that. So A is more of a sine shape, and this is more of a square shape. So that's why you hear the square a little bit more. And then we have our preset. You can store presets or recall presets by pushing this button down here. Let's go back to our flanger. Here's a little chorus. Slow the speed down, bring the intensity down a little bit. There's our chorus sounding like. Delay is an audio signal processing technique that records an input signal and then plays it back after a period of time. The delayed signal may be played back multiple times or fed back into the recording, known as feedback, to create the sound of a repeating and delaying echo. Delay effects were first created using tape loops, and the first engineers to do this would actually cut a section of analog tape with a recorded sound on it, and then tape it together on something like a pencil, and it would loop around the tape machine and create that delay, and it would just keep looping and delaying and delaying. And then various analog effects units, such as the space echo, were introduced in the 1970s. Then digital delays came along in the 1980s, and today it's very common to have many software plugins that incorporate some type of delay effect available in any DAW. On the Starlight Echo Station, again, we have main controls at the top, and these are main delay parameters that you would find really with any delay, which is the amount of delay, the feedback, and the mix, dry or wet. Again, we have our effect select right here, which the tape EP3, emulating some of the old classic analog tape delays. We have analog DMM, emulating an American Bucket Brigade style delay, and then precision, which is just more of a modern delay. All different types of emulated analog delay machines. And then again, we have 3 selections within each effect for different modes, A, B, and C. So for example, if we come up to the tape EP, we can be in mode A, set our delayed amount there, feedback and mix. So we can turn the feedback up. Mix down. And go to a different mode. Then we also have our note value divisions, which we can select down here between quarter note, eighth note, so on and so forth. And again, some of the different character with color and then different modulation of the delay. So this is our analog DMM. And you can hear some of the wobbles in there and some of that modulation. We turn the mix up a little bit. And then here's our precision. And And again, we can pull back a recall. So we talked a little bit about reverb already in the recording terms video, and its effect used pretty much in every modern production. There's a lot of different styles of reverbs, but let's talk about the three most common: the spring, the plate, and the hall reverb. Now, a spring reverb are actually tiny springs that the signal is ran through and affects the sound. This is most widely used in the reverb sounds that come from many classic guitar amps. Plate reverbs are actually huge boxes that were in recording studios starting in the 50s that had a large metal plate inside. And similar to spring reverbs, the signal would be fed into the plate, vibrate the plate, and then picked up on the output and fed back into the studio and recorded to create that synthetic reverb sound. You could also control the length of the reverb by dampening the spring and how much it vibrated to make for a smaller or a larger reverb. And the third type of reverb is a hall. In the 1970s, when digital reverb started to become more widely used, such as the famous Lexicon reverb units, these types of more lush and dense reverb sounds became a staple in the music of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So let's take a look at some reverb. And here's the golden reverberator, which is our reverb pedal. So main parameters at the top: decay, pre-delay, and mix. The decay is how long the reverb lasts, how long the sound decays down to basically silence. Pre-delay is how long it takes for the sound to start to reverberate back and basically as if it were bouncing off of walls. That's what we're emulating here. We have the original source sound, and then how long does it take the reverb to start kicking in, basically the pre-delay. And then of course mix, wet and dry. Then again, our reverb type, we have the Spring 65 emulating the spring reverbs in a lot of classic 60s guitar amps. We have the plate emulating like a EMT 140, and then a Hall 224 emulating those Lexicon units and some of the original classic digital reverbs from the 70s. Again, we can store presets, and we have, again, 3 selections within each effect mode. And then down below, we have bass treble and the modulation amount, which does slightly different things in each of the effects. So we can turn this on. Let's go to the spring. We can turn it on. We'll put a decay kind of halfway, pre-delay there, maybe about 9 o'clock, and then our mix, and take a listen. We can go to a different spring. There's our long pre-delay to give you an idea of what that kind of is. So you can hear that delay before the reverb starts kicking in with the larger pre-delay. Now we can go down to the plate and listen to the plate emulations. And then the different modes within that effect. And our hall. I really like short plates. So we can turn our decay down, turn our pre-delay down, turn the mix down just a little bit, and see if we can get a really nice, bright, short plate. All right, so I have the pedals turned on. I've got a different tone happening. And now we're going to get out of the inputs and we're going to add another guitar track. So we'll do audio. We can do guitar 2. It's mono again, click OK. And I'm going to mute the one we just tracked before, and I'm going to change and make sure this is on line 2, which it is. So now I can record arm that, and we can record our different tone with the pedals. So there we go. Now we've recorded the different tones through the pedals, through the amp, still using the microphone. Now we're going to get away from the microphone, and this is the cable that was going into the amplifier. This is going direct into the solo. So this time, I'm going to plug the output of our pedals over into the input front direct on the solo. So this time, I can hit Control-click, and it says duplicate, which will bring down the exact track with the guitar, or I can do duplicate without content. And now I've got a new track there. And we need to change the input. So now we're on input 1. And we need to change our gain staging. So now we'll hit the preamp. We'll go to input 1, and I'll turn the gain down just a little bit and adjust my headroom. And now we've bypassed the microphone, bypassed the amp, and now we're going direct through the pickups into the Apollo. So now we can go ahead, go back to the beginning and record this same way. So there we go. Now we've recorded direct into the solo. So a third and final way we can do this is unplug the cable from the pedals and go clean guitar direct into the solo. Let's go ahead and duplicate this again. Okay, we're on mic input 1. Now we have a very, very clean tone. So I can hit Command plus and go over to my mixer window, and here now we have access to the unison preamps that we talked about. So here's our selection for unison. So we can come down here and we can do, for example, the Marshall Plexi Classic. And now we've got the presets available. So here's our presets, clean and warm. It's emulating a 57 mic, which is pretty much the same setup as the SM58, the same sort of mic. And then we've got these other ones, Fat Funky Dry, Rock Rhythm. So there's some presets for the Marshall. And again, this plugin comes with the solo, so it's kind of built in right there. All right. And when we go back and record, that is printing that into that file. If we turn the amp model plugin off, this is recorded just as if we went through the actual cabinet. So that really shows you how cool those unison pre's are, acting like kind of outboard analog gear. We also have the ability to insert effects in the inserts section, and you can navigate to any one of these by clicking up here what you want to look at. Let's look at everything. And here's our inserts. So we can hit plus on the inserts, and it opens up the navigation on the left. We can come down here to the precision delay modulation. Come into some of the presets. We have back to the 80s chorus. All right, and we can add more inserts. For example, we can put some reverb on there. Check for our mix. So now we're using these plugins to add that modulation delay and reverb, okay? And now we can go back and record. And we don't even need to re-record what we did. Those plugins as inserts in this area will actually affect the recorded sound. So it's a very cool introduction to the unison pre's and the power of recording as if you're recording through analog gear, and some of the effects that you can add after the recording and then change them. So if you wanted to come in here and do a different preset, all we would have to do is open this up come to the presets, and come down and pick anyone that we want. 63 chorus. And now that'll play different every time as a real-time DSP processing that precision delay. So as you can see, you have a lot of options in terms of what signal and tones you want to get and record, whether it's through your amp and a microphone, pedals, going DI through pedals, going DI clean, and then adding some of the plugins. A lot of options for really getting the tones that you want, no matter what your setup is.